site by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of Cosmic Catastrophe on Revolution Radio. I am your host, Diamond, and joining us tonight, she was in our absence last week, is our lovely partner and co-host, Leah Shaper.
Hi. Actually, I was here last week. I wasn't here the week before.
Oh, well, it all runs together.
Yeah.
What did we talk about last week?
Last week, we talked about, what did we talk about? Like you said, it all runs together.
Well, tonight we're going to continue on the climate change narrative, and there are a lot of things that have been coming together in my head. There is this push to put all this propaganda out on the mainstream media about the Arctic burning up. The Antarctic is now, as of yesterday, experiencing a melting period that is unprecedented in 7.8 million years. That's the headline. We're going to get to that in the data.
True.
What?
Which is plainly not true.
Well, when you read the article, the whole article's a lie. It's completely insane, and I think it's like National Geographic or something.
Well, and the crazy thing is that all you have to do is just look at a graph of the Antarctic sea ice extent, and you can see that that's not true.
Exactly, but no one does that.
Yeah.
And so the first topic we're going to tackle today is the Tonga High eruption and the amount of water vapor that's sent up into the atmosphere and the stratosphere. There's a new study that came out that is suggesting that the amount of water that was blasted into the atmosphere and the stratosphere is so unprecedented that for the first time ever, what we're going to be seeing is global warming from this eruption initially. Mm-hmm. And that may last 1 to 3 years. Now, I'm not so sure I'm completely believe this as of yet, because there are other factors that may be involved. Mm-hmm. Now, did you have a chance to read any of the articles on that they're pushing out there on Tonga? And
the thing that to me is notably absent, a couple of those articles do mention the possibility that the sulfur content of the eruption would induce some cooling. But what I find interesting is that they don't talk at all about what about the rest of the particulates in that eruption, right? It's not just water vapor and it's not just sulfur. There's a lot of other particulates which could potentially also cause cooling. So
yeah, and the cooling has been proven in the southern hemisphere at multiple locations directly after the eruption and for an extended period of time. There's climatological information. We'll get to the specifics on the amount of cooling in the southern hemisphere, but the suggestion is that was the immediate after effect, that all of the particulates were in the stratosphere, which is immediately going to cool because the sun is going to be shot away from Earth way before it hits the atmosphere or anything like that. Mm-hmm. So once the majority of these particulates disperse, as of now, it's been a while, over a year. It's over a year now. Mm-hmm. What then is going to take over climatically is this massive amount of water vapor that's been shot into our atmosphere, which does the opposite. It traps heat that can reach the surface. Mm-hmm. Now, there's another phenomenon that's also going on that a lot of people aren't aware of. And what happened was, I'm going to share the screen here. You'll be able to watch this tonight on Magnetic Reversal News on the replay at 8 p.m. Can you see the screen?
Yes.
Okay, so this is one of the headlines that is coming out in the last few days. This is from PBS. Scientists are looking for additional factors beyond climate change and El Nino in the July heat wave. Now, what is the July heat wave? Well, what they're talking about is the data set that's being shared on Climate Reanalyzer on the sea surface temperatures. These started to go viral in March when there was a departure from the normal and people started to lose their heads, especially here in the beginning of July when there was this major rise. People thought this is going to go straight up and the oceans are going to boil. And therefore now we have the UN climate scare, global boiling.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so this is where all this fear is coming from. But there may be another explanation, and that is ship tracks. Now, for those that don't know what ship tracks are, this is the number one factor that's been keeping the oceans cool for the last few decades. The amount of shipping pressure in our major oceans and the poor regulations allowed them to burn anything they want to move these ships across the ocean. And this is what you get. This is what a normal picture of the Atlantic Ocean looked like before the regulations. No, these are not 400-mile long chemtrails. They're ship tracks. And this is because of the again, sulfur that was allowed into the fuels, and lead and other crap, because it's not like regulations for driving cars where all the fuels have to be filtered and cleaned for emissions. There are no rules in the ocean until 2 years ago. And what has happened in the last 2 years is that these ship tracks have all been eliminated. And many scientists were very concerned about this, and hurricanes, because they said that as soon as we get rid of these ship tracks, the oceans are going to heat up much hotter than they have in decades, and we don't know what's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And guess what we're seeing? We're seeing the ocean heat beyond reproach, and it took a year for them to reduce the ship tracks, so it wasn't until late in 2022 that many of the people were complying. But as of now, the majority of shipping companies are in compliance. And so if that happened like 4 or 5 months ago, and all of a sudden there's no more ship tracks to keep the Atlantic Ocean cool in the summer, when it's hot, you're going to get this.
Yeah.
And you can see the heating began gradually during the spring. It wasn't until the sun reached maximum height, June 21st here, that it really started to separate. And so I think this is really good evidence that the removal of the sulfur in shipping fuel and the reduction in ship tracks can explain what's going on the surface. What say you?
It's very funny to read the portions of this PBS article, the one that you pulled up earlier. Sort of, it alludes to this, well, more than alludes to it. And it's just very funny to read, because they're like, well, these dirty fuels actually help keep the planet cooler. And you're like, it doesn't really go with their typical narrative. But what it did make me think is it's as if you're trying to make people think that no matter what they do, they can't actually do anything about global warming. So we're just going to have to go into climate lockdown.
Yeah, well, what we're going to get to at the end is the ridiculous things that they think they're doing that can affect the climate. Biden just signed a bill dedicating $1.2 billion to a CO2 vacuum that's a factory that sucks CO2 out of the sky. We're going to talk about this.
Are we going to talk about that later? Because I have some things to say about that.
Yeah, because almost 80% of scientists don't agree with it for one reason or another.
Yeah. Well, these articles really make me laugh. The PBS article has a couple of like real gems in it that I just like. I love this little set of sentences. This is a quote from a scientist named, I don't have the first name, but the last name is Klein. He says, just because different computer simulations conflict with each other, that doesn't mean science is wrong. It just means that we haven't reached a consensus yet. What?
Yeah.
Like, again, you're a scientist and you're coming to your conclusion by consensus? Like, that's not science. That's absurd.
Well, the whole article is not science. Let's read this sentence. Scientists agree that by far the biggest cause of extreme warming is climate change from burning coal, oil, and natural gas. Nobody believes that's true. There are zero people that believe that's true, except for people at the IPCC and the UN.
Well, there are people that believe that, but they're brainwashed.
We're talking, it says scientists. If I called up 100 scientists,
yeah,
almost none of them they're gonna laugh at me. They'll be like, oh yeah, the temperature's rising because we're burning coal. Yep.
Unless you've got funding to write a paper to support global warming, then you're going to agree with it.
Well, what the majority of people don't understand is that the scientists that are towing the line, like Michael Mann, are far and few between.
Yeah.
So that they're in, but the media portrays them as being 98% of everyone.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's kind of crazy.
Yeah.
One surprising source of added warmth could be cleaner air resulting from new shipping rules. And I just went over all that.
Yeah. Yeah. So that was the statement that I was referring to that just seems so ridiculous in the face of all of this propaganda. Like, hey, guess what? The dirty fuels help cool the planet.
Right. So they're actually admitting that pollution cools the earth. Now they're trying to remove pollution so that the earth doesn't warm.
Right. But it's only the marine dirty fuels that do it.
Yeah, nothing else.
So funny. Well, check this one out. This is great. Some 9 scientists have looked at recent solar storms and increased sunspot activity in the sun's 11-year cycle and speculated that Earth's nearest star may be a culprit in global warming. For decades, scientists have tracked sunspots and solar storms, and they don't match warming temperatures, Berkeley Earth chief scientist Robert Rode said. They don't?
Well, they don't match the data set that the UN is using.
Right.
But if you go back 15 years, there are multiple papers that show a direct connection between the solar cycle and the temperature on Earth in multiple places.
I love how quick the media is to dismiss the effects of the sun. Like the sun, this huge ball of like burning gas or whatever, however you want to define it, doesn't have any effect on the climate on Earth. It's just us. We far surpass the sun. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. And if the sun is the culprit for warming and you remove shipping tracks, you're going to heat up the ocean very quickly.
But also, if the sun has nothing to do with this, then why does Bill Gates want to send a bunch of material into the atmosphere to block the sun?
Well, because we know if we block the sun, it'll get cooler.
Right, but they're saying that we don't know that. They're saying that there's no relationship.
Wow. Yeah, it is cockamamie world in the world of the jumbled world of climate science is getting ever more confusing by the minute.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is what happens when you spew untruths. After a while, it's like that thing when you're lying about something, and in order to keep up the lie, you have to lie and more, and then all of the lies start conflicting with each other. And I think that's sort of where we're at this moment.
Yeah, and as of 2022, 80% reduction in ship tracks.
Yeah.
So that's going to have a huge effect on the surface temperature of oceans, which is what they're using to scare people. And it might just be an actual pollution regulation that is causing the ocean to warm.
Right. So we better start polluting more, but only the marine vessels should pollute more.
Yeah, it's crazy. So then a bunch of people picked up on the Tonga narrative and the moisture to explain temporary global warming. But why is it temporary? I thought global warming has been happening forever.
Yeah.
So this must be another form of global warming?
Right. You know what else is funny about this is that this narrative about the idea that Tonga was actually going to cause warming instead of cooling, this narrative came out like, I don't know, it was maybe 6-8 months ago.
Yeah.
And then I didn't see a whole lot more about it. And then suddenly it seems like this narrative is being revived.
Yeah, because a paper was released that is proving such facts.
Oh, okay.
So let me talk about it. A collaborative study led by Sergei Kaikin, a researcher at Latmos Uvescu, whatever that is, describes the evolution of this event and repercussions on the global composition of the stratosphere. And the event in question we're looking at here, it's the eruption of Tonga, which, by the way, had the most lightning strikes ever on Earth with any volcanic eruption ever recorded. And there are several other records that were broken here. Now, the study relied on collaboration between 5 French CNRS laboratories and 12 institutions across the world that use a large suite of various satellite sensors, together with over 30 ground stations and transport model simulations that cover a broad range of temporal and spatial scales of this event. So based on that intro, it is the most broad-based study you could get to come to a conclusion on what this water vapor may do.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this is fascinating. First of all, look at the soot coming out on the bottom here.
Yeah.
But everything else above is steam and ash. It's being vaporized from the ocean.
Yeah.
And so the majority of what we're seeing going up there is going to be steam and some sulfur aerosols that are, above the lower ashes, which probably make it to 20, 30,000 feet. This eruption went to 58 kilometers, 36 miles up into the mesosphere. It's halfway to space.
Imagine if it had not been an underwater eruption.
It wouldn't have happened, because the reason they say this was triggered is because the magma welling up cracked the earth, the ocean ran in, causing this violent reaction.
I see.
But there are phreomagmatic explosions, so if it was just slightly on land where was lots of groundwater, this may have been, like you suggest, a much bigger boom.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't really have much to compare this to. It's bigger than any modern explosion on Earth. And they don't know what Krakatoa sounded like back in 1883, but they suggest it might be the same or greater.
Yeah.
But there has been no eruption since Krakatoa, and because most of the big ones, even like Pinatubo, we've recorded, and they pale in comparison to this boom.
Yeah.
Now, the study shows that during the eruption, the water vaporized, meaning the seawater, and the sulfur contained in the volcano's magmatic chamber was spewed 58 kilometers high, which is 36 miles. And listen to this. The mass of the water is estimated to be 146 megatons, which, given the ascent rate of the eruptive column at 40 meters per second that we're looking at here, it translates into the flux of water comparable to the discharge of the Amazon River as it moved up into the mesosphere.
Wow, interesting.
And that is so significant that when they did the calculations, they found out that this water vapor added 13% to the entire water vapor column of Earth.
Wow. Wow, I would not have guessed that it was of that magnitude. That's amazing.
Which is why this paper is getting so much clout, because
the
initial estimates 3 or 4 months ago, which is probably when these first started hitting, was it could be up to 10%. But when they did the study, it was a 13% increase in total global moisture.
Very interesting.
And what have we seen in the last 2 years? Record flooding everywhere.
Yeah. I was going to say, certainly at some point this equates to more rain.
Yeah. So we're certainly going to see an increase in rain, but they're worried that some of their conclusions suggest that the change in total atmospheric vapor may be permanent, because once you shift it, the system rectifies itself by coming into equilibrium with it, and it keeps it that way for long periods of time. So once you get enough water, so that suggests that lots of the things we've talked about, like the Younger Dryas event, where we could have cometary impacts hitting the ocean thousands of times, it explains why it rained maybe for 1,300 years.
Right. And why some of those events seem to be the trigger for some major climactic change overall.
That lasts for millennia.
Right. Like it's not always a temporary effect, and so perhaps this is why.
So this could be
I
a
was just
decadal
thinking
change.
earlier.
Go ahead.
I was just thinking earlier, about how does this compare to the bolide impact in the Gulf of Carpentaria, right? Which also surely would have sent huge amounts of water vapor into the atmosphere.
Well, and I don't really recall, but there were accounts of it raining for over a month.
Yeah.
So I think clearly that was probably more water vapor.
Yeah.
So the good news is this might just be a decadal climatic shift and not a millennial shift.
Mm-hmm.
Because a lot of the severe flooding we've seen isn't unprecedented. It mimics things that are 100-year or 500-year floods. So the chemistry transport model they used, well, first of all, here, let's take a look at this. when the water vapor came up from the eruption, it became the size of Germany. So that just gives you an idea on how big, like it's a mini inland sea that just got put up there.
Yeah.
And we're looking at that graphic now. And then it's going to dissipate and stay up there.
I read a statistic that was like the amount of water was essentially equivalent to something like 58,000 Olympic swimming pools, something like that.
I think Germany sounds bigger.
Yeah, I know.
So the study showed that an additional 5-fold, that's 5x, increase in stratospheric aerosol burden. So the amount of sulfur and particulates that were not water vapor led to a 5-fold increase in stratospheric aerosol burden.
Yikes.
Now, this is the largest since Pinatubo, which cooled the Earth over a degree.
Yeah. So I don't remember the detail exactly, but I read something else somewhere that seemed to downplay the amount of sulfur that would have been injected into the atmosphere, which I thought was, so they're like, so, you know, whatever amount of cooling that would produce is basically negligible.
And they were then incorrect because it's equivalent to Pinatubo, which cooled the Earth significantly.
Yeah.
Over a 3-year period.
Mm-hmm.
While longer-term aftermath of the Hunga-Tonga effects is yet to be known, the available data provide enough evidence to rank this eruption among the most remarkable climatic events in modern observational era. That's a pretty bold statement.
Yeah.
And yeah, the Hunga-Tonga eruption can be said to have initiated a new era in stratospheric gaseous chemistry and particle microphysics, with wide range of potential long-lasting repercussions for global stratospheric composition and dynamics.
Mm-hmm.
That's a mouthful.
You have to wonder, too, how much. So if there's a change in the chemistry in the atmosphere, like how much does that affect cosmic rays, for example? You know, I mean, I can't.
Yeah,
I can't tell, but there's likely to be some kind of change there.
Well, I think there would be more nucleating things and more cascading ions.
Right.
Yeah. So it would accentuate, if we have an increase in cosmic radiation coming in due to the magnetosphere, it's going to accentuate what the cosmic rays do. Yeah.
Exactly. That's what I mean. Yeah.
So that could be an additive effect that we didn't even consider.
Mm-hmm.
Now, preliminary observations showed that the eruption column ejected a large amount of volcanic material into the stratosphere, leading to speculation that it would cool the Earth. And in fact, when I put out my podcast, the day of the eruption, the title was simply Hunga-Tonga Will Cool the Earth. And it got 375,000 views in the first 48 hours. So that was quite impressive.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of the people were warmists telling me I wasn't wrong.
Of course.
But later calculations showed, and you were asking about the sulfur, that the amount injected was just 400,000 tons. And that's not really that high compared to Pinatubo.
Okay.
So it was about, I think, 1/3 of Pinatubo. So that's what led them to the speculation that less cooling would occur.
Right. But what about all of the other particulates?
Yeah, they only look at sulfur.
Right. So that doesn't make sense.
No, and we've got a long way to go with volcanic explosive index. They didn't even know how to rate this, you know? Didn't have it. There's no lava. There's really no rocks and ejecta. It's all water and sulfur.
Yeah.
So really it's like a VEI 3.
Right.
But because of...
But it's apples to oranges here because it's a completely different kind of volcano.
It had no name. They didn't even... It's ultraplinian. They don't even have a name for it. They had to invent a name.
Yeah.
So in the end, they ranked it VEI 5.7, which is 0.3 below Pinatubo at VEI 6 because it doesn't have the amount of ash and rock and lava like Pinatubo.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So they just put it right below it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, despite all this and the low amount of sulfur, the eruption had a cooling effect on the southern hemisphere, as we alluded to in the beginning. It caused a slight cooling of winters and had spectacular sunsets that we reported on all through Australia, New Zealand, and the South. A cooling effect of 0.1 to 0.5 C lasted until September, November of 2022. And when we get back, we're going to break down a little bit more on this eruption, what may happen, and the $1.2 billion vacuum in the sky. Oh my.
Listen to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
Who owns you? If you're not in control, then someone else is. Join me, Ivy West, for Voices on the Wind, Saturday. I discuss government, health, metaphysics, suppressed science, universal mysteries, little-known incredible facts, alternative energies, and even more than you can imagine. Won't you join us on Revolution Radio Saturdays for Voices on the Wind with me, Ivy West.
There are lives in the balance, people under fire, children at the cannons.
Because if your head's in the sand, your tail is a target.
Thank you for listening to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, the #1 listener-supported radio station on the internet. Please help support this station so this battle can continue forward. Revolution Radio!
The Secret Kindergarten is here for the young children of the world. The best program on the radio for kids, dealing with the most important topics in the whole universe. Fairy tales, music and movement, numbers, plants, animals, fun, colors, insects. Take care and cast your ears out to catch a story from the world of other young things. Reach out, up, under, and over. Sing a song. Talk about feelings. Just remember the magic word. The magic word is no. Step on into the Secret Kindergarten. Saturdays, 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. Eastern Time, right here on Revolution Radio.
Join me on the Brian Rouge Show on Revolution Radio, Eastern Standard Time, every Tuesday night from 6 to 8. We talk about the four most vital things, in my view, affecting all of humanity. Number one is UFOs and aliens and their agenda for the advancement of humanity. Number two is the Jewish establishment's control over all aspects of human civilization. Number three, the truth about Adolf Hitler, how he was the opposite of what we've been told. Number four is advanced ancient global civilizations. Join me on the Brian Rouge Show, Tuesday nights from 6 to 8 on Studio B on Revolution Radio.
Thank you for listening to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. Any commercial advertising you may hear in this program is of the sole discretion and benefit of the host of whose program you are listening to. Revolution Radio does not endorse any commercial products, nor does it accept monetary compensation for on-air advertising of commercial products, nor will it ever. We are and shall remain 100% listener supported. Any product advertising on this program are considered used at higher risk, and Revolution Radio shall not be held liable for any claims or damages received from any product advertised within this program. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps. The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and FreedomSlips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, FreedomSlips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
And we're back with the second half of Cosmic Catastrophe on the #1 listener-supported internet radio, Revolution.radio. And I stopped sharing the screen. So before we talk about the $1.2 billion vacuum in the sky that FJB is signed off on, what are your thoughts so far about what we're seeing in the media about them actually talking what I believe is actual science? They're giving all the options on water vapor and sulfur, and for some reason, PBS actually put all the information in their article, albeit slightly skewed.
Yeah, well, skewed and in some places completely inaccurate. I mean, it's interesting. I mean, I stuff like this, articles like this, I always get the impression that it's like, okay, well, we have to at least talk somewhat scientifically in order for people to believe us. Like for an average person, you read this and it probably sounds perfectly correct, and you don't have time to fact check any of this stuff.
Well, and the headline is still salacious enough that if you don't read it, it's like, oh, climate change, global warming. Oh my God.
Right. So, and maybe it's being written also in this manner because it does seem like there are more and more people that are listening to the narrative about global warming, and then they look at their actual world and what they're actually experiencing, and what they're experiencing isn't matching what's written. And so they're going like, well, what is this?
Yeah, and we're going to get into that.
Like, where is it?
We're going to get into that. So everything's burning up. The Arctic's melting. Tonga is going to add to global warming.
Oh, I can't wait. And I can't wait to read like how the narrative develops about what's happening on Maui. I mean,
oh yeah. Wildfires caused by climate change.
Right.
They're actually caused by humans, and the Maui wildfire is probably no different.
Right.
Now, here's some interesting caveats before we jump into the facts that will blow your mind. America's last ski resort is closing this weekend. That's the longest a ski resort has been open in the West for decades.
Yeah.
We're skiing in Killington until July on the East Coast.
Right. Well, and even, it didn't stay open super long. Wolf Creek Ski Resort here could have stayed open longer than normal, but they didn't, simply because they just don't get as much ski traffic. So
yeah, because in the spring here, even in March, it gets so hot from the sun, rivers form by 3 o'clock in the middle of the ski slope.
Right.
So it's not the best conditions.
Right.
But this was this morning in Germany. And I've been reporting all week about record snows in the Italian Alps. It's snowing in the middle of August in Germany and in the Alps. And so the winter season really hasn't ended, or has it just begun here in mid-August? And guess where it snowed this morning? The North San Juans, just north of Pagosa.
Oh, did it really?
Yep. And the high temperature today is only supposed to be 74 here down in the valley.
Yeah.
So if we were in town, we would see snow-capped mountains.
Yeah, I don't know if you this August here seems like it has felt a lot like early autumn. Have you noticed that?
Yeah, and now this is weird. Rex was just up there up above tree line last week. There's snow up there, so that snow is now getting covered.
Wow. And then you and I have talked many times in the past about there's sort of a point of no return, right, where it's still snowing up in the mountains in the summer, and then that's when you start to get glacial building, right? Because you get that almost, like I used the term last week, thermal inertia, right? It starts building on itself.
And then you've got the enhanced albedo. You got all these white places in summer that are cooling the earth, and no one even gets it.
Yeah.
So it's a rapid shift.
Yeah. And
so the media is desperate to get everyone to still believe that the polar bears are dying. And I can't believe that narrative still exists. They show polar bears. This is when is this dated? August 11th, yesterday. They got a polar bear sitting here trying to scare you. The desperate race to create a protection zone around the rapidly melting Arctic. So the problem with that is that Arctic ice extent as of yesterday is at a 9-year high. So they're trying to protect the 9-year high Arctic ice extent. And the area is as high as it's been since 2014.
Right.
So I don't know what they're trying to protect when in the last decade we've seen higher and higher ice numbers. And it gets more insane. Look at this article. I think you might have seen this. Once every 7.5 million years event is currently unfolding in Antarctica.
Right.
To say unprecedented isn't strong enough. And let me read this gobbledygook. In the past 8 years, sea ice in Antarctica has reached new record low 4 times, according to the ABC. The first 3 times, ice levels that have dropped in the summer have rebounded in the winter. That's how most Arctic ice works. It ebbs and flows. But they say this, listen, but this year, during what is currently winter in Antarctica, scientists have confirmed that the ice is not reforming, leaving long stretches of Antarctic coastline bare.
Yeah. I love to.
Isn't that scary?
Yeah.
The problem is 98.4% of the Antarctic shore you have a mile-long ice sheet to get to the ocean. There is not a single truth to what they just posted in there. This is the state of ice in Antarctica on August 11th. That's yesterday. So you can see there's like 110 miles up here in the warmest part of Antarctica that doesn't have ice.
Right. Right. In the summer. No, I'm sorry, but it's the winter in Antarctica right now.
Winter.
Yeah.
So
and then the other funny thing too is in that article, there's a sentence that says, it just says, some people think that this is due to natural variability, but that's extremely unlikely. It's extremely unlikely based on what?
I know, because here's the problem. They didn't show
work.
this graph. This is the entire data set of Antarctic sea ice since we started calculating in 1978. And 2022 is on there.
Yep.
Okay. This is unprecedented 7.8 million year event in Antarctica. They are liars. There is no change in Antarctic ice since we began recording in 1978.
Yeah.
What we do have is a peak measurement in 2013, right there. And we've got these low marks that seem to be all at the same spot.
Yep.
There's no
frankly, the low mark in whatever that is, 1987, say, is the lowest of all of them.
Yeah, and they didn't tell us about that.
Yeah.
They probably started looking at the data, here.
Yeah.
So Antarctic sea ice yearly maximum, there's no change.
Yeah. Well, and actually you just said it, that they started looking at it here, whatever that is, 2013, 2014. I mean, I did a little experiment earlier this morning, just, Googling Antarctic sea ice extent, Arctic sea ice extent, and every single graph that shows up typically starts around 2013 or so. So it's like for the average person, again, even if you do want to check the work of the media, if you go just Google it, that's what you're likely to find. And it is going to look like that it's decreasing.
Because you can, depending on where you choose your starting point on any graph, you can make it go up or down. But what you want to look at is the entirety of the data set, which is right here in front of you. It shows there is no change in Antarctic sea ice maximum since we began recording.
Which is not even 50 years.
No.
And then they make these claims based on the claim that it's never been like this in 7.8 million years or whatever it is. It's just based on like some statistical calculation. But it's like if you only have data going back to 1980, then how can you can't apply that you can't apply that statistic using
what happened between
data set to 7.8 million years. That doesn't make any sense.
7.8 million and 1980.
You're going to base it on a 50-year data set? That's completely inapplicable. Again, apples to oranges.
All right, and now the fun stuff. The U.S. to fund a $1.2 billion effort to vacuum greenhouse gases from the sky.
I didn't actually get to read the New York Times article because it's behind a paywall, but I read some other stuff about this.
Well, guess what? Many scientists are skeptical of the technology.
Well, wonders never cease.
And even environmentalists have criticized the approach because these factories require tens of megawatts of coal energy to run them. Isn't that crazy?
Let's solve global warming by expending more energy in the form of fossil fuels.
And guess who's building these factories and running them?
I don't know, Bill Gates.
The fossil fuel industry.
Yeah. Oh, right. Yeah, I did read that. Yeah.
So then environmentalists are like, wait, they're just going to make machines that suck more carbon dioxide out of the air than they're making, and then they can keep accessing oil and gas. And I'm like, yeah, that would be great. Why is that a bad thing? Energy prices are low. We've got heat in the winter, air conditioning in the summer, and you've got your 350 parts per million.
Yep.
So why are they mad about that?
Right. Well, also, I mean, this is the thing that really gets me, and you just said it, 350 parts per million. 350 parts per million. 350 divided into a million. And they're talking about sucking carbon out of the atmosphere. Like, how do you do that? You have to suck up the entire atmosphere for that to have any effect.
And then you've got to break off the 0.04% carbon dioxide and capture it and then release the rest back.
Right.
That's got to be super expensive.
Well, now there is one element of this that makes a little bit of sense, and it's the part where it's the oil and gas industry building these. Now, maybe if you build one of these carbon sucking plants right next to a refinery, well, maybe you have a chance then of sucking up a lot of pollutants and carbon. Like that would be where you would want to put it. So because then you don't have to suck up as much of the atmosphere to have some kind of effect, right?
So are they actually sucking up the actual pollution and just sending that back out into the atmosphere and just keeping the carbon dioxide?
I don't know.
That would be the dumbest thing. And that's probably what's happening here.
Right.
Now,
let's take all of the stuff that we're spewing into the air and just put it in the ground.
Yeah.
Like, what does that do?
So here is the groundbreaking in April at a direct air capture plant. That's what they're calling it. So they are just capturing the air. And this is being built with Occidental Petroleum. They're building it in Texas.
What is Occidental Petroleum?
It's a petroleum company, like BP.
Oh, it's a company. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So the Biden administration is going to spend $1.2 billion, not on Ukraine this time, on carbon dioxide vacuums. He's going to.
No, we're just going to spend another $25 billion for Ukraine now.
All right. So this $1.2 billion will help build the nation's first 2 commercial scale plants to vacuum carbon dioxide from the atmosphere.
Just the concept makes me crack up. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, we're going to vacuum the plant food away from Earth, and it's going to save us. This nascent technology that some scientists could be a breakthrough in the fight against global warming, but others fear it's an extravagant boondoggle. I would say that they're putting it lightly there.
Yeah.
Jennifer Granholm, the energy secretary, announced Friday that her agency would fund 2 pilot projects that would deploy the disputed technology known as direct air capture. And Occidental Petroleum will build one of the plants in Clayburgh County, Texas. And Battelle, a nonprofit research organization, will build the other at Calcaseo Parish on the Louisiana coast. Federal government and the companies will equally split the cost of building the facilities.
Now, what do you want to bet that like Occidental Petroleum's ESG score now skyrockets?
Oh my goodness.
Way above, like Tesla, of course.
Now, these projects are going to help us prove out the potential of these next-gen technologies. That sounds amazing. So that we can add them to our climate crisis fighting arsenal.
This is just like money laundering is basically what it is. It's just the revolving door of industry and government, right? Like,
Who came up with the idea? I know how to get funding. CO2 vacuum.
Right. And again, like, I mean, what are you going to do? You're going to suck up the entire atmosphere to have any effect and then kill us all? It's like, what?
One of these technologies includes direct air capture, which is essentially a giant vacuum that sucks decades of old carbon pollution straight out of the sky.
No, those two words should never be together, carbon and pollution. Like when I say pollution, I am not thinking about CO2. I'm thinking about things that are actually toxic, which CO2 is not.
Now look at this. What does it say in the headline? 1.2 billion, correct?
Yeah.
I can't believe it's on the third paragraph. The 2021 bipartisan infrastructure law includes 3.5 billion to fund the construction of 4 commercial scale direct capture plants.
Wow.
Friday's announcement covered just the first 2. So they're hiding the money.
Yeah.
They got 3.5 billion for carbon dioxide vacuums.
Yeah.
Now, oil and gas companies lobbied for this to happen, for these direct air capture plants to be included in the law, arguing that the world could continue to burn fossil fuels if it had a way to clean it up at the same time. So there we go.
Oh.
And then many scientists are skeptical, and environmental advocates have even criticized the approach. In a TED Talk last month, even Al Gore is not on the bandwagon because he's got no money in the game. He's into fake meat, and that's failing. So
Yeah.
he's got no skin in this game. In Al Gore's TED Talk, he gave a blistering critique of direct air capture technology, calling its use a moral hazard that would enable fossil fuel producers to continue to pollute.
Yeah, no, it's more like if you have divested from fossil fuel companies and you're now invested in, solar panel development and all of the mining that's going to be required to build all of this green technology, well, that's when you're going to speak against this because you've already changed your investments.
Yep. It's useful to give them an excuse for not ever stopping oil, he said. This is Al. Shut up, Al! I just had to get that out. It gives them a license to continue producing more and more oil and gas, which produces more and more cheap energy. And if we can capture their fake pollutant CO2 and make them happy, I don't understand why they're not happy. Right. See, here's the kicker. You can't make a wind turbine with wind turbines.
Mm-hmm.
There is no wind turbine factory that's being run on wind turbines that's making wind turbines.
Nor can you make solar panels without oil and gas.
Yeah. So how?
Also,
go ahead.
No, that gives them a license to continue producing more and more oil and gas. I thought we were past peak oil. I thought we didn't have enough. I thought we were running out. Wasn't that the narrative like 5 years ago, 10 years ago? Peak oil, we're going to run out. We have to do something else. Where did that narrative go?
Well, these crazies want zero oil, which means we're all dead.
Yeah.
There is no technology to replace it currently.
Well,
and
not
the
to mention
more
that
they reduce it, the more it affects humanity.
Yeah, and any developing country, their development is just going to stop in its tracks without oil and gas.
And then the funny thing about the technology itself, which we have to give credit to you, Al, even though you're in your hole, Mr. Gore noted that the current cost of direct air capture technology is extraordinarily high. Yeah, it costs $3.5 billion to make 4 buildings. How do you get the money back? Are you going to sell the carbon dioxide to somebody?
Oh, you get the money by just continuing to hit the taxpayer. That's how you do it.
Yeah, so these structures cost $3.5 billion to build. How much is their electric bill every day to run them, and they don't produce anything? This is a complete bankrupt the world idea.
Yeah. Yeah.
And in order to run these CO2 vacuums, they're run on fossil fuels, coal, natural gas, and oil.
That's so funny.
It's the dumbest.
It's like it's as dumb as the people that don't realize that the electricity for their electric car comes from oil and gas or even coal.
Yeah, if they're charging it in Arizona, it's coming from coal. It depends on where you're charging it.
Well, I'm sure you saw like quite some time ago. There was a clip of, I think it was like a spokesperson for GM or something. They were showcasing some new electric vehicle, and then some reporter asks, where is the electricity coming from this? And she's like, it's from the building behind me. And you're like, oh my God, are you really that dumb?
And then the guy turns around and says, the building behind her is fueled electricity from Exelon Oil, which runs 90% off of coal. So they're charging the electric car off the building when it's actually a coal-fired power plant.
Right.
These people. And I think they can't be that dumb, or unless the world has gotten so good at hiring very pliable, compliant people.
Yeah, I mean, I think that obviously there's a lot of people that are really brainwashed, and I think to some degree that does include people in the media. I think there are people in the media that know that they're lying, and then there are people in the media that really haven't thought about it slightly more critically to realize that none of this makes any sense. Like, I mean, even just down to the simple facts about, let's say batteries for electric cars, right?
Oh my
The
God.
amount of pollution that induces in making the batteries and then in disposing of them, it's just crazy. And it's like, that's an easy thing to think about, but I think there are enough people that are brainwashed enough that they're not able to think about it. So they actually believe what they're saying when they're writing articles like this or talking about it on the news.
Yeah, and it's so funny that electric cars are completely made of plastic, including the batteries.
Yeah.
And guess what? Where plastic comes from?
Oil and gas.
Now, it's so stupid. There are currently 30 such carbon dioxide vacuuming plants on the earth already. That's crazy. And CO2 hasn't changed at all since they've been recording it.
Right.
So we got 30 of these plants. We're about to put 4, the biggest up here in the US. And guess what? CO2 is not going to be affected.
Because again, if it's only 350 parts per million, how are you going to have any effect on that without sucking up the entire atmosphere?
Yeah, you're not. And in fact, finally, this is the data we didn't get up last week that we wanted to talk about at the end. The natural climate variability on Earth is so extreme that even the fear-mongering climate change narrative pales in comparison to what the Earth does automatically every 100,000 years.
Right. Like, you really want to be scared about climate? Try looking at one of these graphs. Right? And guess what? It has nothing to do with you. Like, you think you have that power? You're out of your mind.
Yeah. And look at how low CO2 was in the past when humans were on Earth. This is the entirety of humans, right?
Yeah.
Between 200 and 250. So we must have been struggling because you go much below this threshold and all life starts dying.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, those really low peaks in the beginning there, those are like, they look like they're down at like 150, right? And this, as we've discussed before, this is when plant growth stops.
Well, this is 180 is the lowest right here, around 700,000
Oh, I'm
years
looking
ago.
at the scale wrong. Yeah.
So that things would be
low.
choking there. Yeah, 170 is the end.
That's very scary. And it's amazing to me that we've hit low peaks like that so many times.
I mean, even in the recent past here, right before the Younger Dryas warming, we were at 175.
Wow. It's interesting that things seem to rebound right at that level. It'd be interesting to sort of take a look at if there's some element of the level of CO2 there that helps contribute to the rebound.
Yeah, it could
like
be.
some kind of threshold that's being reached.
But it's the temperature that jumps that causes the CO2 to move. So
yeah. The
CO2 is a product of what the temperature is.
Right. Not the
and
other
again,
way.
the temperature is being driven by the sun. So the sun is creating this graph. Whatever is the mechanism that makes this happen on this 100,000 year time scale is anyone's guess.
Yeah.
But every 100,000 years after it's warm for 10 to 20,000 years, we drop back into an ice age. There is not one example of it ever not happening that way. Mm-hmm. And the interstadial we are in is exactly the same as the last 5 as far as the shape and the scale. which means we're probably still in this pattern,
Mhm.
which means that we are going back into an ice age for 80,000 more years.
Yep.
And there's nothing we can do about it. No.
And that's more normal than the situation we're in right now.
Yeah. And there's no amount of CO2 sucking vacuums that are going to change this. Because what
So
they're trying
silly.
to do is prevent warming. And guess what's coming up? The exact opposite.
I always think that, at the moment that Al Gore's plan to block out the sun is implemented, that's when the globalists go, look at what we did. But it won't be them. It'll be the sun that did the work.
And you heard it here first. Thanks for listening. That was certainly a good show. Check it out tonight on Magnetic Reversal News at 8 p.m.
Listen to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. We'll be right back after this message.